G.I. Joe, American hero. I don't know. That didn't hit as hard as I thought it would.
You'll never get me, Joes. I'm Cobra Commander.
Join the team.
Hey, theMCGuiRE Review, and today we're going to take a look at a game from Renegade Studios, which is G.I. Joe Mission Critical. Now, this is not a new one, so I'm not going to do a kind of how to play here. You can definitely find that out there. There's a number of really good how to plays. But I do want to go over the game just from a review perspective and what you're getting here for your money. So I do think that this one does offer something a little bit different and a little something more than what you generally get in these styles of games. And what I mean by these styles of games is this is another game that is going to be like the Rising series. Now, the Rising series has done, and these are from different companies here, but I do like to, kind of compare these. And this is not a, paid for ad. This is not a paid for promotion. This was sent to the channel for review some time ago. And as I do these, I do like to kind of compare to other games of what you're going to be getting. So this, I really love the Rising series games. I got the Avatar one. I do want to get the Star Wars one that they made, but they never released it here. But I do love that Avatar one. And then very much like Marvel United as well. Actually, this is an X-Men copy I still got in the shrink. But this is a fantastic game. I actually got a couple copies of this because it was so low cost, but this is a game that is very similar to the both of those conceptually. You're going to have the enemies that are going to get added to different zones of the board. The zones of the board are going to become alerted, and overloaded, and then it's going to spawn out into other areas. Every time it's your turn, you're going to want to move around to different areas and take care of the enemies. Here's two different types of enemies that will get populated across the board, and try to keep that under control so it doesn't get, overloaded. We're also going to get the really cool larger miniatures here of the enemies. And the enemies are going to be henchmen and nemesis and bosses in this game. The Cobra Commander is the boss of the game, but there are some nemesises as well. Those will wreak havoc. Now, as I said, there's two different types of miniatures. They are a little bit smaller. You can see here, a little bit smaller than the larger hero miniatures. The green ones are going to be your Joes. You get a number of them. I'll read the ones you get. And then the gray ones are going to be kind of the bosses and the main core enemies. And then the red and the blue are kind of your foot soldier type enemies that you're going to be fighting. And there's two different types of those. You're going to get the Crimson Guard as well as the Cobra Trooper. All right? So the red is the Crimson Guard and the blue is the Cobra Trooper. And they do have different abilities. You'll flip these over when you battle them and they'll go on a battle board. And that's what we'll talk about here in a minute, because I think from a review perspective, when we look at those other two games that we just saw a minute ago, those are very, very similar conceptually, where it is just kind of that mechanic of moving around the board, and you're always working on trying to kind of take down the boss, and everything you do every round and you're trying to respond to is all about that. This game has that as well, but it also has this mechanic here with these larger boards, which I think is pretty cool in the way that it works. So we'll talk about that here in a second. You're going to get your rule book. I think they did a really good job with the rule book. It's I would say, pretty well designed. It is easy to understand how to play the game. There isn't a ton of rules. The game is a 2 to 5 player game, but if you do want to play with the 2, 3, or 4 players, there are some modifications that you will make. They seem to kind of set it up from the beginning in the book, and just sort of how it's designed to be played right out of the box is with 5 players. But there are some things you do change if you do play with anything other than 5 players. Okay, you can play this game completely solo if you want to, no problem. You will just control however many of those characters you're playing with if you play solo. It's a fully cooperative game. There's no competitive nature to this game. Okay, So you got a really nice rule book. You've got a really nice box. The box is pretty good size, though, as you can see. You may see another game sitting on the table here. I'll talk about that here in a second. I actually forgot about it. It was kind of hidden behind this box. Well, from my view, it was. The box is pretty good size. You'll see here. Okay, so it's going to take up some shelf space, but the game is pretty big as well. So it does take up quite a bit of table space. That's just something to know. Could they have scaled all of these components down and made this half the size? Yeah, they absolutely could have. But I do kind of enjoy the scale on this one, the way that they did it. I normally would say they should have scaled it down, but for some reason with this G.I. Joe IP and the way this game works, I do like it at this larger scale, and it is fun at that larger scale. But very high quality, really nice box. Got some spotting on it there with the characters, and it's really, really cool. Set that down there. All right, we're going to get this out of the way. This is just kind of sitting here. This is another G.I. Joe game that they make. This is actually a deck building game. They've got a number of IPs. They got Power Rangers, My Little Pony, G.I. Joe. They got Transformers. They got a number of things, okay? And those IPs that I just mentioned specifically, they all kind of have like a board game and a deck building card game, and they've got RPGs as well. And you can kind of mix and match these games. They all sort of use the same system. So you can literally take this G.I. Joe game and you can mix and match it with the Power Rangers Mighty Morph game that's like this as well. And that's right there in the rule book. So that's pretty cool. This deck building game they make is actually really cool. I've got the Transformers one as well. I think I prefer the G.I. Joe one. We're going to do a video on this here in a little while. It's just cool to see how they have all these different IPs, and they've been able to create different games by use of those IPs. Okay, when the game starts, you will start the game with one of the Joe heroes, the G.I. Joe heroes. There's Stalker, Scarlet, Duke, Snake Eyes, got to have Snake Eyes, and Cover Girl. So those are the ones that come in the base game. You'll start the game with one of those. You'll get some action tokens here. There's various different bags of little chits and tokens. You will get a couple action tokens. Every character kind of takes 2 actions on their turn, and cooperatively you'll determine how you want to take those actions. And that is just like that. It isn't like you have to take your 2 and then you can take your 2. You can take 1, this person can take 1, this person can take 2. It's back to you. You can take your second one. You really can figure out how you want to do that as a team to take all your actions. And I do like that. I like that design with these types of cooperative games where you really can split up your actions and decide as a group when you want to take your actions and when you don't, okay? You're going to have a deck of cards, okay? There isn't any deck building aspect to this game, but there is a deck management. I mean, you do have a deck of cards. You'll only get so many at a time. You'll shuffle them. You'll have a discard pile. You'll be able to take actions to shuffle your hand with your discard pile all up again and kind of refresh everything. So it does have that kind of aspect of a deck builder, but you're not like buying and bidding on and getting more cards throughout the game. You do have a set deck of cards as a player, and you'll have quite a few of them here per player. So like Duke has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So you'll have 10 cards when you're a player. And every single player does do a little bit of a different thing, which, aligns with their Joe, their character. Okay. Same thing with the enemies. The enemies are going to have cards as well. Specifically, these cards here are going to be for your nemesis, your henchmen, your bosses. Those are going to be mixed into the deck that you're drawing from every time you deploy over the course of the game. So when you start the game, you'll kind of mix in those bosses in specific piles, and that way the game kind of scales. And after you get past a certain part of the game, all of a sudden now a henchman or a nemesis or a boss pops out, right? So that's kind of cool. I like that. You kind of start off, you fight sort of the standard troopers for a while, and then all of a sudden you run into a boss, and it's a harder fight. The way this game is going to work is it's going to have this smaller deck here, and on one side of the card you're going to see these little symbols, right? And they're just going to be the Cobra symbol is going to be 1, 2, 3, and they're going to be different colors. Some of them are going to be red, and some of them are going to be kind of a yellow like this. And that corresponds to your Crimson Guard and your standard Cobra troopers. So you'll start with this deck, you'll shuffle it all up, and you'll flip over a card like that, and you'll say, oh, okay, I need to deploy 3 of the Cobra, and where does it go? Oh, it goes there. So you look at the top of the card after you flip it to show where it deploys. When you start the game, there's little token icons. It has 4 different symbols on it. This is one of them, the tank. You'll randomly place those on the board, so it's always random. And then you'll just deploy your 3. Let's say the tank was here. You'll deploy your 3 right there. Every one of these does have a max limit. Once you reach that, then it becomes alerted, and then you get the whole, alerting, and you got to take care of it, and the spawning, and all of that kind of stuff that can happen in these types of games, okay? Now, the cool mechanic about this game, to me, and where they really took the mission critical one step further than kind of just your standard manage the board and defeat a boss, is how the bosses come out throughout the deck. And then when they do, you have to have these battles where you come to this board right here, which I thought was really interesting. Now, the bottom is reserved for when you want to go into combat when it's your turn. Because when it's your turn, you can either move, you can recover, which is you can get some of the cards back basically in your hand. You can also do this whole thing where you power up. That is you can think of as like a full refresh recovery, where you shuffle all your cards back together and then you draw 5 again. Or you can battle. So if you moved into an area and you wanted to go into a battle, and if there's another Joe there, they can help as well. But if you want to go into a battle, then you would start grabbing the cards of what types of units are in that area, and you would populate them onto this board here. There's a couple different types of abilities that they have. They either can guard or they have a fast ability. If they're fast, you basically move them to this side, so you kind of have to go in a row. If they guard, it's an interesting mechanic where anything that's adjacent to them, and that's top or bottom, really have to attack that unit, so they're kind of guarding the other units. You have to take that unit out. So that's kind of a cool concept. But these are fairly easy to defeat for the most part. It's once you start to get to these top cards where if you get a nemesis, what happens, or a lieutenant, or even a boss, you have to put more cards out here. So if you fight a lieutenant or a nemesis, you got to put 4 cards out here. If you fight a boss, you actually have to put 6 cards out on this, which, that is much harder to be able to defeat a boss or a nemesis than it is like a lieutenant or any of these types of characters. And those fights may go on for multiple turns and rounds to be able to defeat those, which I think is pretty cool as well. And then you have this board here. So as you are playing the game and you're defeating characters, specifically these units here, you kind of gain experience. So as you defeat these, you'll put them here on these little red spots. Okay, and you'll just start, whatever. It's whatever you defeat, you put them here. You just keep going. And whenever you want, you can only do a max of how many they have here, but whenever you want, you can cash in that experience to get vehicles that will help you. And they're much more powerful. You can use them in fights. You probably want to use those vehicles in fights with bosses and with nemesis and lieutenants. You don't want to waste them on stuff like this unless you absolutely had to for one reason or the other. But all you'll do is when you start the game, you'll have 3 of these that are always flipped over. And these are your vehicles. You'll see here for the side-by-side cam. And I thought this was a really cool concept where it's like, oh, I want to use the attack, the vamp, the attack vehicle. Well, it costs 4. It says right up there. It costs 4 if I want this vehicle. And this vehicle is passive. It says, until the end of this battle, each time a hero performs an attack, they may re-roll 1 die. Okay, so that might be a good vehicle if you have, that might be a good vehicle to get if you have like a bunch of people in like one area that you're trying to battle. So I take that back. Maybe you would want to do that when you're fighting some of these, like if you have a bunch of them in one area. Other ones are going to be better for more of that boss fight. These vehicles will be. And then once you use one, it'll go out, and then you'll replenish it and you'll put it back. And you can just spend these guys as experience to be able to do that. And I think that piece with this board here of how that works with the battles is really kind of a different aspect that they brought sort of to this type of game. And it added a little bit more of a little bit more complexity, a little bit more depth to that actual battle. And I think that was a really good design that they came up with. Now, the other chits that they have here, there's the chits for the vehicles, where the vehicle would be, put that on there. There's, you know, your damage counters, you're going to put that as enemies take damage, as well as your different action tokens, and then your energy tokens. That's the last piece. There are this concept of having sort of energy, and as you go into a fight, everybody sort of pools their energy together, and you put it here on this energy board. There's also going to be 3 of those energy tokens in the middle here, and if any point in time a character dies, they sort of go back to the pit or the command center, and one of those energies come off of this command center area. At any point in time, if a character goes back to that area and there's no energy tokens to pull off, then you've lost the game effectively. You can win the game if you stay alive, there's energy in the pit, and you defeat the boss and you get to the end of that boss battle. Then you win the game. So it is a fairly tense game. I think it's designed well from that perspective, like most of these games are, that you have to just board manage, and it's like every single turn there's kind of a disaster that's happening that you need to take care of in some way. So I have found the games are fairly tense. You don't always win. These boss battles can be very difficult when you get a boss out on the board and then you also have enemies, especially if the boss is with a bunch of enemies and you're trying to combat all of that at the same time. And then you're deciding, okay, how do we spend this XP to be able to get the right vehicles to help us with that battle? It can be difficult. And to make it even harder, if you're able to kind of master sort of the standard side, these are double-sided, and the backs have this red side on them. And they actually make it even more difficult. And not only that, they add an ability as well there on the back. So like this one, like on here, there's no ability to this location. On this one, it says, during each battle at this location, vehicles have +1 cost. So it's going to make it harder for you as a player, and each of them are different that add that little ability on that red side, which is going to make it more difficult for you to be able to effectively beat the game. And that's where when you really want to go full-on G.I. Joe mode, you can go here with the red side. Okay, team, and that's G.I. Joe Mission Critical. The miniatures are fantastic. They really did a nice job with the miniatures. They look really good. I'm not sure if I mentioned they're 44 millimeter scale, so they are a little bit of those bigger miniatures. They're perfectly detailed enough. Are they over the top? No, but they look really good. Good sculpts, good poses. They have just the right amount of detail. If you wanted to, paint these up, I think they would look fantastic. Especially with these bigger models, might be really cool to paint. I thought about doing that. Maybe just spraying these down and then washing them, keeping them the same color, and then maybe actually painting these larger models. I don't know. We'll see. But even if you didn't do that, I like all the different plastic color choices that they went with, which keeps it like it's perfect. These are green, right? This is like, a nice light gray, the red and the blue. They really went with some nice choices of colors that all thematically went with the game and keep everything visually separated. I'm not sure if we mentioned the dice. Like, the dice are just used when you go into combat. It's just miss or hit or kind of a double hit. That's all these are used for. You'll roll these dice when you go into combat. You'll use the cards in your hand. It's just like any of these types of games, although there are dice that kind of go along with the cards and the abilities. to roll, to give a little bit of an extra sort of random bit where you roll the die and see kind of how things go. Okay, so great game. The thing that I will mention also from a review perspective, it does come with a little bit of a heftier price tag. This, I believe, is 120 MSRP. They are doing some deals right now, I believe, and they have done some deals in the past where you can get the base game with some of the expansions. There's a number of expansions for this game, a number of big box expansions as well as smaller expansions. I actually want to pick up all of the smaller vehicle expansions for this. I probably will get at least one of the bigger box expansions. We'll kind of see. I'll probably swing by the booth at Gen Con this year and kind of check out. I think they've got some newer expansions that are coming for this title. So it is something that they have supported quite a bit. They're continuing to support. Whoop, knocked my little Cobra Trooper. Get up there, little Cobra Trooper guy. And you can find it for significantly cheaper than that based on where you look, kind of just aftermarket, kind of third-party sites. But it is a cool game if you like this style of game, like if you like those other games I showed earlier in the video. I think you're going to like this just as much, if not more, because of these added aspects. And if you're a kid of the 80s and you're a fan of G.I. Joe, then I think you're really going to like this game because the IP really is pretty cool and it adds a pretty awesome flavor on top of a game like this. And with that, team, keep rolling them crits. This has been the McGuire Review, and we'll see you next time.